Good evening, and if you're just joining us, welcome. You are listening to the Angel Rock on United Public Radio Network. I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin. You're also listening possibly from 107.7 in New Orleans, Louisiana. Before I tell you a little bit about the show and myself, and I do have an amazing guest this evening who I will also introduce, can I please invite you guys to come join us over on the UFO Paranormal Network channel on YouTube, because I keep an eye on the chat and I love to involve anybody that's joining us live in the discussion. If you have comments or questions, I like to make you part of the show. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Canada, even though we're broadcasting from New Orleans, and I want to give Joe Montaldo a huge shout out. He is our producer, the owner of UPRN. He's also has many awesome shows on the network like UFO Undercover. He has the Gray Zone Uncensored. We have many host chats on here. There's something for everybody on UPRN. I'm from Canada. I'm a psychic medium. I am also a crystal Reiki energy healer. I'm an Akashic Records practitioner, a spiritual teacher and mentor, and I'm also a registered nurse. I don't know if I told you my last name. If I didn't, I'll repeat it. It's Lorilei Potvin. If you're returning to the show, and we have quite a few people that join us regularly, thank you so much for your support. Please make sure to tell your friends, as well as if you're new here, a little bit about my show. I say cover all aspects of the supernatural and other things. And when I say supernatural, I'm talking about anything from the actual ghosts and goblins, whatever you want to talk about, including UFOs. We talk about aliens, and then we talk about a lot of spirituality things like chakras and power of the mind and power of positivity and a little bit of everything else thrown in between. Now, tonight we have a great guest. I want to give a huge shout out to Gavin Lee Davies, who is a friend of this show, a friend of both of us. And he referred this wonderful lady to me. And I hope I say her name correctly here. It's Agi, she said, Agi Heale. She is a CPCC and a PCC certified, what they stand for, professional coach and a certified Neuro-Linguistic Programming practitioner. She has coaching practices in London and Singapore, where she is broadcasting from today, where she helps clients who are feeling overwhelmed to cultivate a positive mindset and be calm and confident and make lasting changes for the better. She also has a new book out. I'm going to get her to tell you all about it, the title, the whole bit, why we have it. And I think it's a very timely book, especially with what's going on in the world. We're going to be talking about anxiety tonight and your practice. My shows are always about my guests. Welcome, Agi. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great. The joys of technology, that we're sat on the opposite side of the world and can still make this happen.
Yes, you're right. Well, actually, I updated my internet. We live in Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario. Actually, my partner has a show on this network. It's called The Delicious Recipe on Tuesday nights. And no, it's not a cooking show. He actually, I really don't like the term conspiracy theory, like truth-seeking. He says we throw all the ingredients in the pot, we stir it up, we see what we come out at the end with, and he leaves it up to the listener or viewer to decide. And it's called Delicious because his name is Del. And one of his friends, when he lived in Toronto, used to call him Delicious. So he has his chef's paper. So that's how the name came up.
I love it. Sounds juicy.
Well, where we are, though, we're only about 35 minutes away from the Minnesota border. So we're pretty close to the U.S. and about 6 hours north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I'm going to ask you all about yourself. Like, that's a pretty interesting field to get involved in. What got you involved? Never mind that you run a practice over in Europe, obviously in the UK, in London, and then you're in Singapore. I'm dying to hear all about you. I don't do research on my guests before, so we can just sit and chat.
Amazing. So where to begin? Well, to rewind slightly, yes, I was actually born in the States. Grew up in Hong Kong, spent time in the UK, and then now based in Singapore. And to rewind slightly, the reason that the book came about and my kind of interest in the field of anxiety is I was historically working in financial services recruitment. And very long story short, I got to this point where on paper I had everything. I was a director, I was managing 3 teams, I was earning money, I was engaged to be married. I mean, tick, 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 tick.
Yes.
But behind the scenes, I was really struggling with anxiety and was completely blindsided in the end with panic attacks, which I had never had before. I didn't even have the kind of terminology or the words to understand what was happening. And so Generation Panic, the book, has really been born out of my experience in those times. And that, yeah, in a nutshell.
You know what, though? I have, well, they're not children anymore, they're grown up, but my eldest he's going to be 26 in a couple of weeks, and he has always had anxiety. And my youngest has severe autism. And I know that anxiety can go hand in hand with autism spectrum disorders, but it's almost like I'm seeing with this younger generation, so many kids suffering with anxiety, suffering with depression. And then as that discussion has opened with that younger generation, it's actually okay for people in you're much younger than I am, but in your age group and even my own age group, it makes it okay to start mentioning and having this discussion about anxiety, that it's real. That my son has actually tried to tell me how deep and dark it can get for him, especially when he has depression. And because before, especially with women, like we can go back in history that women were just neurotic. And I mean, isn't the Rolling Stones have a song called Mother's Little Helper about Valium? Like it really was not taken seriously. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look back, and they all had kind of smelling salts to bring them back round when they had a dizzy spell or something had, knocked them off. And maybe that was just anxiety. We didn't have the words or the concept of it back then. But yeah, I agree. It's absolutely everywhere. And I think when I originally wrote Generation Panic, it was absolutely that age group of people in their 20s and 30s. And there's a lot going on. I mean, in that age group, everyone is from very single to divorced with kids, or starting out in their careers or established in their careers, trying to get on the property ladder, dealing with social media, keeping up with, like a fast culture. And I think there's so much anxiety that's almost like an undercurrent of that. So that's really who this book was written for originally. But what's interesting is that obviously I speak about it so openly, and it's a huge, I believe that the techniques in the book are so transferable, is that yes, it's focused at that group, but I got an email yesterday from a 94-year-old woman who was reading the book and is like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is something that I've struggled with. And so they really are transferable. I think Generation Panic maybe can be broader than what I originally thought it was.
Yeah, because I was reading a little bit about it that I didn't get a chance. I apologize to read it because Gavin sent me so many books too, like just crazy. I say I'm busier now with this craziness going on than I think I was working 3 jobs when my eldest was a baby with being a nurse. I mean, it's just insane. But what I liked about it was that in the book description, it's in little packets, almost like little pieces that then you said, like it's transferable and real life information that's usable by anybody. Obviously, 94-year-old woman probably thinking, where was this when I was younger? And again, I'm going to be 56 in August, so obviously I'm not a 94-year-old woman, but even growing up, mental health was not taken seriously. Younger generation, it was always said, what do you have to be anxious about? And, when you look now at today's generation, and obviously raising 2 boys, well, the youngest is different challenges. I really believe life is a lot tougher now than it was when we were growing up with the pressures, with social media. For us, it was magazine covers, right? Not realizing shop. But when you've got real life people and you've got influencers, like you feel like you just never measure up. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I completely agree. I think we also have to bear in mind that what we're actually seeing online is usually filtered one aspect of the day. It doesn't really take into consideration the full context. And so we see this perfect, amazing, photoshopped, ideal life. And we're like, oh, like, I'm not doing that. What on earth is going on? Like, I'm not keeping up. Exactly. Exactly. And that's such a negative spiral that you get caught in. Like, what's wrong with me? And what am I doing wrong? Why don't I look or be like that? Or why is my life so different? And I think that's really challenging. And also to your point about the different generations. I actually just got a review last week that was from a lady who said she was part of the keep calm and carry on generation.
Mm-hmm.
And if she had had this book, she would have avoided a nervous breakdown. And I think it just wasn't spoken about. You're right. It was like a different world, a different mindset. And so as a positive, it's coming more and more to the fore. People are talking about it, teenagers, young adults. It's more accepted, I think. I hope.
Well, it is, but I know from working in the healthcare field, even from the time, say, something like fibromyalgia came out, because we were talking about pain before we went on. I know you heard us talking, Joe and I, and I still couldn't believe that, because my mother was a sufferer. I'm actually a chronic pain sufferer from my back injury. That's why I'm not working as a nurse. I still stay on top of everything, have my license, just the physical part I can't actually do. And when fibromyalgia came out, it was literally what doctors didn't understand it. And they thought there was a real mental component to this, like that women, and because it mainly affects women, not just women, but mainly. And there was such a stigma around it, but it's been that way through time, it seems, with mental health, because I'm going to use just from personal experience with autism. You get very little of it in school. I went to university to get my degree. It's mentioned. You get 1 year. I always said we had 4-year degree. You get 1 year of the abnormal, meaning the disease or diseases. So there's only so much time and so much you can read about. But when you go back to the 50s, and of course you don't have the numbers of autism that you do now, but it was blamed on the mother that she didn't bond with the child. It was called refrigerator mother syndrome. And you can still see, they'd be elderly adults now or getting into that age group. In their history, there is still a copy from the beginning of their diagnosis of things like that. So we've come a long way. Never mind, though, how timely is this book? Because collectively around the world, we are seeing such anxiety. And what people don't realize is, I think people even have this picture in their mind of what anxiety looks like. And anxiety has many different faces. I mean, some people lash out with anger, some people withdraw. There's so many things. Did you find that with your book, or even if you're comfortable with your personal experience? What have you noticed? What manifests in the way of anxiety?
Absolutely. I think it can show up for different people in different ways, and how they describe it can be quite interesting, because they might say, oh, I'm just really stressed this week, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or oh, I had the most challenging meeting and I felt really shit about it, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And yet to me, those are all like experiences or little moments of anxiety that they just might not have coined in the same way. But for me, anxiety is a very physical experience. Like I really feel it in my body. And, when I feel that, it's like almost this undercurrent, this like feeling of electricity that comes through my body. My palms might start to sweat, my heart rate increases, my stomach might start doing backflips or drop out. And I think the biggest thing that almost scares me the most is that my mind goes blank. Like I'm unable to string together simple sentences or make simple decisions. And so like almost like my rational thought kind of runs for the hills. It wants to have a breather. But yes, I agree. I think particularly at the moment, like anxiety is everywhere, and people are anxious about their health, they're anxious about finances, their jobs, the security of their family. There's so much that comes into it. It's a very testing time for a lot of people.
It makes sense, though, when you said all thought goes, because it's almost like your body has gone into the fight or flight syndrome. And we know that with fear, that the first thing that happens is all the blood in your body goes to your brainstem, the primitive parts of your brain that run your heart, run the breathing, run everything else. So yes, rational thought goes out the window. Just 1 sec here. I just want to say hi to Zach Mann. He's here. He's one of our regular supporters. He says, "Good evening, everyone." He says, "As a member of Gen Y," he said, "I'm an old school millennial." I hate labels. Because but again, it defines what age group you're in. I understand that. He said, I can definitively say that I do have constant battles with my anxiety. I have even theorized that I believe that people in Zach's age group, my son's age group, and beyond, like younger, I almost am starting to think they're a new breed of human being. Like, I don't know if it's being very sensitive, like to energy in the way of empathy, empathicness, that they're picking up so much. Never mind what we've just talked about, and we barely hit the tip of the iceberg of what people are encountering. But to see this many young people experiencing it, and I don't even think it's a matter of that it's more acceptable. It's almost like it's an epidemic, I've noticed. And I've asked this question for a long time, like, what is going on that we're seeing this in the younger generation? What do you think?
I think I agree. I think there's a fragility to that generation that I would argue also goes up to the kind of people in their 20s and 30s. But I think that it speaks to the amount of change and the amount of information that's been flowed their way, and that feeling of keeping up, I think, is what's most challenging. You know, when I was a kid, I mean, I didn't have a mobile phone. I didn't have Facebook or social media till I was like at university. It wasn't even really around. It wasn't in our social group. It wasn't something that we all had. And so I think when you've got those pressures from such a young age, I mean, we were just able to be kids when we were younger. I'm sure you were the same. I mean, it was so kind of, I don't know, green and simple and pure and
Well,
kid-like.
it wasn't, because with my generation, what I've noticed is, so I was born in 65. So we had black and white TV with only a few channels with the rabbit ears. Then evolved into where we are with TVs now, but we've gone through CD players, Walkman, the old telephone that people filmed their kids trying to get them to figure out what it was and how to use it. I mean, as a teenager, we had this long, stretchy cord. There was no privacy. You had to like stretch it around the corner if you wanted to talk to, say, a boy or something. Then we've gone to computers. Like it's a hobby of mine, but I've never even been shown how to turn on a computer. So everything I learned, I kind of had to learn myself. And, I love where we are now. It has its detriments, but I keep looking back to this age generation of my own, thinking we really had a lot of, like, we could go out and play outside. You knew to be home when for dinner or what time, or when the street lights were going out, when it was nice out in the summertime and what have you. I get you with that. But nowadays, and even raising children myself, I've been tried to be very realistic about this, that if I was thinking about it at a certain age, my eldest has probably known about it 3 to 4, possibly even 5 years earlier than I'd even considered it. So the one thing I did with him was, and even my youngest, had to change the verbiage a little bit, obviously, but I've told them that if there's something that you have a question about, I don't care if it's sex, I don't care if it's drugs, I don't care what it is, and you need an answer, yeah, you can go on the internet, but then you got to have some discernment to be able to figure out, is this the truth? Is it not the truth? Because you find so many different sources. I've said to them, then would you please come and talk to me? No subject is off limits. If you are not comfortable talking to me, please find one of your adults that's around you, whether it's an aunt, an uncle, trusted adult that loves you and has your best interest, and talk to us, because your friends don't know any better than you do. That's the age I was in, because you could not ask these kind of things, right? So
Yes, and I think that will bode well for your relationship. I think I had a pretty similar experience in my childhood. I was very open with my parents. I was able to drink with my parents. I used to smoke when I was younger and did that with them.
Yeah.
And I think that led to a far richer and deeper and more honest relationship. I never hid anything from them. I wasn't trying to sneak out. It was more of like, let's have a real chat about it and find where's the middle ground between the two of us.
Exactly.
And I think that has made our relationship way better than it could have been, for sure.
Yeah, my
So
eldest
yes.
still comes and talks to me about things and what have you. But what I'll forget, and I do forget sometimes, so that's why I try to understand that I do not suffer from anxiety, but having two children, raising them, and I will be out. And my son's usually fairly easygoing. We have a great relationship, and say we're at a shopping mall or something, and he'll start getting really snappy, like snippy, and just really getting cranky with me. And I try to be cognizant of it, but then I'll say to him, this isn't like you. What's going on? Mom, there's crowds everywhere. We need to get out of here. And so I try to read the cues, but he's actually, I'm very lucky with the fact that when you can put it into words, like how you shared with us, and thank you, what you experienced, or he's tried to share it with me for me to be able to have some empathy and understand how debilitating it can be, or a panic attack. Working as a nurse, I have seen people come in and literally it's difficult to differentiate whether somebody's having a heart attack or a panic attack until you get them on a monitor and what have you. That's how scary they can be. Would you agree? You're probably even worse when you've gone through it yourself.
Yes. I mean, I had no idea what was happening in my body and was quite frankly terrified. I mean, I just didn't understand as well. So it was just panic stations. It was real like fear. And like you said, it was the fight, flight, freeze response. So, it's quite incredible. Our bodies are there to protect us. It's ultimately keeping us safe. It's just we're misreading the threat in front of us and reacting accordingly. And actually, we just need to update ourselves. There isn't the threat. There isn't the saber-toothed tiger. There isn't the poisonous berry. It's just we've just processed it a little bit wrong. But yes, it felt very real and very scary when I was having them, for sure. And then I think also, sorry, just to add to that, like the fear of it happening also feeds that, because I was then so worried that it was because it was out of my control. I wasn't like, great, I'm ready now for a panic attack, like on you come. Yeah. Like it decides on its own accord. So then you're constantly living in like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen in this meeting? Is this going to happen at dinner? Is this going to happen in this important thing that I don't want or need to have it happen? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, when you start thinking that, obviously you're kind of putting it out. I don't know. There's some sort of
you took the words out of my mouth, because that's
magic at work.
Say nobody plans for a panic attack. It's not like you're thinking about it when it first happens, or you could be in the middle of something and you've had a really overwhelming week. It's almost like your body's building to this volcano and it explodes, and and then you worry because like this can't happen in certain parts where I am, or if I'm driving, or I know people that are so debilitated by anxiety that they are off on disability. Like they can't even drive a car, or so that's why when when Gavin contacted me about your book, I went, oh my gosh, I've not had anybody on to talk about this topic, how timely it is and how relevant. Are you comfortable sharing? Because I want people to go out and buy your book. So what kind of techniques, like, we're not going to give the whole book away here, but some things maybe that you found really helpful, or maybe somebody that shared with you, like you said, even the 94-year-old woman. So people know that it's not like this heavy read, but it's something that's anybody can use this in their life.
And you speak to a really important point, that it's not a heavy read. The whole point of it is that it's so accessible. It's bite-sized chapters, really like digestible chunks. Because when I was struggling and like desperately searching for something that was going to like fix me and just make me feel good again, I didn't have the capacity to take on like swaths of information. Like I didn't have even the headspace to like digest or read through like dense information. Mm-hmm. And so a huge part of this book is making it something that people can really like dip in and out of, just take a short little chunk out of and apply it, feel the effect, feel the impact. So the structure of the book is it's set out over 47 different chapters. Mm-hmm. And each chapter in itself will have 3 to 7 different techniques, okay, that people can try. And there's a whole range. I mean, that's the beauty of it, is that I'm not deciding, like, even for you, Lorilei, like I wouldn't decide what you needed in any given moment. You have the power, like you have the control to be able to go through and be like, hey, that really resonates with me, or no, that one doesn't feel as good, or whatever it might be. So I mean, I can run through some of the techniques, absolutely.
Sure, but what I wanted to add with that was, I love that, and I have great respect for somebody, and it doesn't matter what field they're in, they present some information that anybody can digest or take in, but they say, you don't look to me to be the authority here. If anything resonates with you, I love that word, resonate, and then go on, either utilize it, try it out, see what works for you. Or even when it comes to, say, information I provide to people, and I say, if it resonates with you, you don't have to believe what I'm saying or trust it, but please, if it gives you an impetus to go out and look yourself, that's great. That's what we want to see. So sorry, I just got a message here. I'm getting messages as I'm coming through here. Sorry, I'm trying not to pay attention to them. Distracting. I'm one of these people. No, I don't have ADD, but it's like squirrel.
What? Bright sparkly thing over here. I'm like that too. I'm like, oh, something sparkly and fun.
I know. What I think I felt when you were describing this, I'd love to hear, a few or maybe something you found helpful, or somebody else. But you can almost craft your own individual plan out of all you've provided here. And again, that's why it sounds like it's so transferable to any person or any age group. Would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it feels, the way that I describe it is that it's really like a toolkit or a guide, a companion, something that you can return to again and again. And it changes, even for me personally, I absolutely revisit this before big things, anything that I'm feeling on the back foot about, which we're all human, like it still happens that something will throw us off. But that will change even for me. Like I'll have one thing that's like my go-to, and I'll get to it and I'll be like, oh my God, this isn't working today. I need to flick through and find something else. It's kind of similar as well. You were saying about your partner's podcast, that he provides, like, it is like a recipe. It's like, here's all the ingredients and you make what pizza you want. You, I don't know, you might like pepperoni. I might like 4 cheese, whatever.
Or when you're Canadian, we eat ham and pineapple that a lot of people find very distasteful. Yes.
but like, who am I to judge if you want ham and pineapple? Like, if you want ham and pineapple, you'll find it in Generation Panic. Like, go and find your ham and pineapple and eat it. And does it taste good? Great. If it doesn't, change it, put something else in. So a couple of things that I always bang on about is breathing, the power of breathing. It sounds incredibly obvious, but breathing is with us at all moments, whether you want it or not. And what I like about it is that whatever situation you're in, whether you're in a important meeting or a podcast or an interaction, a dinner, whatever it might be, the breathing is the one thing. You don't need to do anything crazy. You don't need to kind of stand up or
like
go
everybody's
to a
going to be looking at you like, what are you doing?
No, exactly. Exactly. Right. So you can just do it kind of quietly, and no one needs to even know what you're doing. And what I find is that a lot of anxious people, including myself, like, breathe right up here, and it's all high and tight and short, shallow breaths right up in my chest.
Get a breath in deep when the anxiety is building, though.
Totally. Totally. And so by slowing things down and really pushing into that deep belly breathing, imagining, like, I like to think of our tummy as like caves with like nooks and crannies with this dark, stale air. And you want to be pushing in this new, fresh, light air and kind of clear it out, basically. And there's been a whole host of research about the power of breathing. It can make you perform at a higher level, think clearer, feel better, age slower. There's so many positives to it. So breathing is like one of my absolute go-tos. It's kind of the foundation. I'll do it before pretty much any interaction I have. Like, even before this call, I was just doing some deep breaths and taking my time. And I think that
you're comfortable. I hope you're okay.
Oh, I feel super comfortable. But like, and that's, do you know what? And that's another thing. Like, I felt really, well, I did. I felt good. I felt really excited about today. We've had great conversations behind the scenes. And so it wasn't an anxious thing for me, but I was like, how can I increase my like current state? How can I make myself even more on the front foot and feeling good, feeling clear?
Well, plus we never met before. Like we had emails back and forth. That can be pretty stressful for people, depending on how some feel about meeting a new person. I love to meet. If I haven't met somebody, I purposely won't look them up unless just a little blurb that I get, because I love people, love meeting them, love learning about their story. So to me, this is exciting. But for somebody with anxiety, this could be a real trigger. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that will change for different people. So
Yeah.
someone this, and that's the other interesting thing, is that we really are so different. So even Lorilei, for you, I mean, this is something that makes you super excited, you're ready. This is not a big deal for you. Whereas for the next Joe blogs, this could be monumental. And in some ways you can't understand, because you're like, what? This is so cool. Like, how can you not enjoy meeting people? And so I think also part of our role is to understand that we're all different. Everyone's got their own version of reality, and we're not there to judge what they find. Someone might find buying a coffee difficult, or seeing, even when I was struggling and having my panic attacks, seeing some of my best friends was really hard, because I don't know, it made me spiral. Whereas to someone else, that would be inconceivable. Like, why on earth is she having such a hard time of that?
I could see that.
So yeah, so everyone's going through their experience, and that's kind of part of the beauty of it, is that if someone maybe is struggling with meeting new people, ask you and find out your story. Or like, you're going to have a process, you're going to have a way of approaching that situation that makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel confident, calm. And so modeling, which is a huge part of NLP, is looking at people who do things really well and being like, how do they do that? And what can I take from what they find easy, and apply it to my life? So yeah, modeling is quite a cool technique too.
I'm going to read Zach's comments here too, but I don't usually talk about my boys like this in a podcast, but they have been my greatest teachers. And one of the things is, I think, with being an empath as well, and I do remember what it's like to be at a certain age when I was younger. And because my youngest was nonverbal for a long time, he still struggles. He's very severely autistic. He's 23, and he's very much like at that precocious 5 to 7 year old age. So he's really no trouble, but he needs mommy for everything. And again, it's literally like, I'm not going through it. I'm not him, but I could actually almost feel like some of the things that he would go through. And over the years, some of the things that have worked for him, for example, that wouldn't work for other people, is he needs pressure. He needs a proprioceptive. I know you would understand that system. He needs that input. Or for him, I remember when he was little, there was this little tiny toy he had, like a Tamagotchi or something like that. And I guess the battery was running low, and he was screaming, "Mommy, stop, make stop, make stop, make stop." I'm running around frantically trying to figure out what it was. Here it was, this little toy on the wall unit, probably 4 meters away, for people about 18 feet away, and he could hear it, and the assault to his ears, I guess. So I really try to put myself in the position, whether it's family, whether it's other people, is what might they be experiencing. I'm not experiencing it myself. It's just that to try and have that empathy, understanding, and compassion. Because the other thing I always say too, it's not my job to judge. We don't know. We only get, remember, we're talking about those snippets that we get on the internet. That's really what we get as people when we meet other people, or like you said, your friends. Like, depending on, whether we build it up in our mind or start to worry, are they going to understand this? They think I'm going to be weird, or some people just don't get it. And you know what I'm saying? So whatever the reason is, I think it's so important for people to remember that we only get a little tiny piece of somebody's life, and we don't understand what maybe they've been going through.
I full-heartedly agree. I think we see people and make assumptions without even realizing it. You know, that the subconscious bias. And it's a really interesting point because we don't have to agree with someone. You don't have to step into their shoes and agree with what they're doing, but you can step into their shoes and see it from their perspective, and then have that level of compassion that you're talking about that I think provides for a deeper relationship. And everyone is fighting battles. Like, everyone has stuff going on in their lives, whether they're showing it to you or not. They've all had paths to get to where they are, whether you choose to see it or not. And I think one of the most dangerous things we're doing in our lives currently is making assumptions. And I think that's where I personally went hugely wrong, is I was making an assumption like, oh my God, everyone else is sorted. Like, why am I the only one who in the whole world? Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. Everyone else is nailing life, and I'm like having a complete meltdown.
Yeah, that's what I tell everybody, honestly, is, you know what, when you see somebody and they look like they got it all together, they're thinking the same doubts, the same worries, the same concerns, might be about different things, but we're all going through it. And the same thing is, even when you see somebody really confident, maybe they just put that confidence on like a coat. You don't realize that, right? Because your imagination and visualization is so powerful. We heard the saying, fake it till you make it, right? And it's true.
Yes. Yes. One of the chapters is actually on masks. So as you said, like a coat, putting on a confident coat is like putting on these masks. And the only thing I will say is that, you know, with incredibly confident people, I think I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but there was a master in Japan who all of his students were like, how come you just seem so calm and nothing kind of phases you? You know, whenever anything bad happens, you just seem to carry on. And he said, I'm human. I absolutely get knocked off center. I just know how to get back to center quicker. And I think that's kind of it, is that the masters, the ones who are so confident, are using the tools of Generation Panic to their benefit, so that they have moments like, that's life. We're all going to have challenging parts that like make us feel on the back foot. But how quickly can you get back to that center point? How quickly can you get back to you? And ultimately, having the tools and the techniques that will help you do that is essentially what Generation Panic is. It's like hoping to kind of tool people up and make sure that they have it, so that they can return, they can feel good, they can feel happy.
I love
it. So simple.
I want to, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, it's better with the updated internet, but we still need to call them, because it's almost like I have a little bit of a delay and it'll seem like there's a pause. I should have warned you of that. It's better than it was, but so I don't mean to talk over you. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So Zachman says, when my anxiety kicks in, I go from 0 to 60. He said, this happens at my day job quite often. Mostly, sorry, I got my crack phone I'm reading here. It's hard to read. It says, when it falls to me, when I have to fix major goof ups. He said, it's a severe form of tunnel vision.
Interesting. So going back to that fight, flight, freeze response, I think what's happening is that regardless of the situation in front of him, when something is gone wrong and he needs to fix it, then there's that reaction is automatically kicking in, kind of almost subconsciously now, I would have thought, because he said that happened every time. And so I mean, there's so many different things you can try, but essentially what we want to do is take out the threat so that it doesn't feel like he's under attack in any way. And then he can decide which are the tools that he needs to feel good in that situation. So it might be something like modeling. Like, one of the chapters in the book is talking about how can you step into other people's shoes and use their perspective to your benefit. Because I think what I found anyway, when I was feeling really anxious, like all I could see was the anxiety. Like, it was like this huge kind of block right in front of my face. And I found it really hard to kind of see around it. I didn't even have the energy to do so. And so much of how we deal with it is being able to get new perspectives and new angles. The situation ultimately doesn't really change, but how can we see it from a fresh perspective that we might not have considered before? So a couple of things that I encourage, I mean, think about like, what would a 4-year-old say? Or what would a 90-year-old say? What would a politician, actress, Mickey Mouse, Daffy Duck, you know, what would be their perspective on something? But I think for Zach, the biggest thing is in that moment would be to breathe, go and stand, take a moment, go to the bathroom, whatever it might be. One of my favorite techniques is I just call it like flicking, and imagining like you've got all this energy, like all this electricity running through your body, and just like taking it off, like shaking it all out, and kind of getting rid of that extra energy.
That really happens. Like if you were in chameleon photography, for example, because I talk about often about having an aura, whether people think that's hippy dippy new age or not, it's the truth. And so part of this is, and even when I'm teaching people to access their intuition, their gifts, we all have them. Babies, I mean, I've done shows on this where babies or even animals, they live in the now, right? They aren't encumbered with all the worries about bills and about everything else. Children's work is play. A lot of animals, that's what it is too, besides obviously surviving and needing to eat, if they're out in the wild, but they're not encumbered with all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, you will get animals that have anxiety, obviously, or whatever. But my whole point is that children have this gift to be able to, say, for example, see spirit or whatever it is. But as we go on in life, the reason why I bring this up is because my guest, unfortunately, last week had to cancel, and it wasn't his fault. His internet wouldn't work. So Joe said I could put on a replay, and I thought, I haven't done a show in a long time. And so just myself. So I did. And we talked about everything. I said we went all around the world and back again. But I did a reading for Zach, and I know he won't mind because it's out there. Anybody can see it. But he was asking about this, and he gave me a lot of key points in what he was saying, because I know Zach well. I know him personally too. And he's one of these people that, you know, he's a team player. He like, I could see why when he said when there's mistakes that need to be fixed, they go to him. So he's not, I was talking with him about boundaries and not putting too much on your plate and what have you. But you think about that too, right? But he's the type of person that's very reliable. And again, I'm going to say team player. So when there's a mistake, right, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we know people are counting on us. And same thing, I said, people probably, oh, Zach will do it. Zach will do it. Zach will do it. Right. And so because he's the person that he is, he'll take it on. But then there's a lot of pressure on himself. Right. Because, and I'm just, Zach, feel free to jump in here and add your feedback. But you put a lot of pressure on yourself to fix the mistake, is what I'm saying, to come the whole roundabout in this long story. But
yes. And that's a really good example of when our strengths and the things that make us really special and unique go into overdrive and actually stop serving us as much, or because he's so much of a team player that there's no flexibility for him. He kind of has to live up to that, or he probably feels the pressure. Sorry, Zach, if I'm putting words in your mouth.
Oh, he's like written a lot.
Okay.
This way, and I love
okay, cool.
His comments.
And you're right. I think talking about, children and babies are kind of our greatest teachers. I think they're just amazing that they, keep jumping back up. And this principle of baby steps, I think, is so powerful, because I would have thought that with Zach, he gets given the problem and he's so consumed with fixing it and like getting to this end result. And actually there's so much that can come into that if he just focuses on one foot in front of the other, and and then we get knocked down, and like a baby we just try and jump back up again. Like, what do I need to get back up? What do I need to take that first step? And as soon as you start asking those questions and just get through that minute by minute, it's that kind of present moment that we're talking about. Actually, I can already tell he's like an amazing human being. He's incredibly resourceful. He can get through the next minute. So anxiety is
so funny
often.
you say that. There's a reason why I'm smiling. There's a few
Yeah.
things you're saying
Okay.
that I say. Like and again, I'm not a counselor, not a life coach, but I do counsel a lot of people when they come for healing or what have you. But those are some of the exact words I use. I've used them with my own boys or other people, patients, whoever it is if it becomes too heavy or it becomes too much. Sometimes we just got to take it hour by hour. Sometimes it's just minute by minute. I only got to stay calm down, minute, just this minute. And get to that minute, then we move forward, the baby steps, right? The other thing I've been wanting to ask you from what we're talking about, though, when I really love this that you brought up, return to center. So say somebody's really in the midst of a lot of anxiety, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. Does that happen sort of after the fact? Because I could literally see someone saying, "What do I need to return to center? Return to center." And after they've read your book, they know there's a few techniques. So the main thing would be to get that anxiety down to a manageable level where we can start using concrete problem solving, and thinking about some of the things we've read. And so some of the things you're suggesting, would that be something that's a person might do after the fact? Like, they've got themselves calmed down, everything's okay. And then when they've got maybe some time to themselves or what have you, even looking at themselves introspectively and thinking like, how did that work? What could I add the next time? Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, is it just
Oh,
maybe about simplicity
absolutely.
in the heat of the moment? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge part of this, is that when I was struggling with anxiety and panic attacks, I was like, oh my God, kind of like Zach, like, how do I fix this whole thing? Like, how am I going to make myself feel better? And in the panic, it is very hard to rationalize, bring things back to center. And those are many of the techniques. Actually, the first kind of 5-6 chapters are different things to focus on, like in the panic, when you are in that moment, how do you manage it? Mm-hmm. But also, even within some of those techniques, there's things that need to be practiced outside of it. So that when you're in the moment, unless you have things that feel very familiar and easy to do, mm-hmm. when you're feeling incredibly anxious, it's very hard to access anything, let alone something that's completely kind of foreign or new.
That's where I was going with this big long thing.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, you've only got so much energy. And the other thing I don't think people realize is how exhausting it is to be in a state of anxiety, never mind almost in the midst of a panic attack. You're able to stave that off. It is debilitating because mm-hmm. your body is pumping out all this cortisol, all this adrenaline. Like you said, you're breathing shallowly, and it's just an awful feeling. And the only reason I can honestly attest to it is lately I've been picking up anxiety from somebody. I am not an anxious person. I don't know where it's coming from. But what I have to ask myself, same thing with being an empath, I pick up other people's physical pain. So I have to stop, take a breath, and then ask myself, is this mine? Your body will answer you, by the way, either a yes mm-hmm. or no. And if it's mm-hmm. a no, I don't attach anything to it. It's just return to sender. Return to sender. Mm. So go ahead.
Yes. And you just perfectly kind of like stop, breathe, mm-hmm. then question, mm-hmm. and then get back to center. And a couple of things. First of all, I mean, you need to know where center is. And that can be a whole journey and exploration in itself. I didn't know where center was for me when I started this. And so I didn't know what was important or how I wanted to operate. And so even defining that is quite an important stage. Mm-hmm. But yes, there is and can be a process that helps you get back to that. And then to your point earlier of always tweaking, like, hey, did that work? Or like, how could I do that even like 1% better? Or if I was to go into exactly the same situation, how would I have changed that? Or what would have worked even better for me? So that you're constantly like, it's that taste testing and like constantly tweaking, taste testing, finding your perfect pizza. And that in itself, the reflection piece, the kind of aftermath is also a crucial part of this.
I'm glad. That's what I was wondering, because and I, even when you said toolbox, I like that, because one tool, it'd be nice if we just had one tool for anything, whether you're building something physically or we're building this imaginary toolbox, because sometimes you need different tools in different situations. So like you said, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's almost like your body builds up a tolerance, if you will, like, you know what I mean? Like, you've used it so many times that it's like, nope, that's not working anymore. I need something else. So I'm just going to read Zach's comments here. He put quite a few. Where are my glasses? Now I sound like an old lady here.
Just before you read that, I'm gonna I completely agree, because, you know, if we think of an actual toolbox, and if we were to build, just say we were building a house, you know, we wouldn't just use the hammer every single time. It wouldn't get us hugely far, and there's going to be things that are like right down in the bottom of that toolbox, you know, like really dusty at the very bottom, that like this really weird little thing that doesn't seem to make sense, but is like the perfect thing for, I don't know, screwing in that tiny little corner, blah, blah, blah. And understanding that we not only have this toolbox with all these range of things, but we have the intelligence and the ability to dive in and choose which one we want. That's the power.
It empowers you.
Totally.
So you're not out of control, because that's one of the sensations that I've had people share with me. And it is the worst feeling, because my eldest, like I said, was suffering with anxiety, especially when he was living in the same house with me. He wouldn't be at home, but he'd be at work, and I'd be walking around going, what is this feeling? Oh, I don't like it. Like I can't sit still. I'm like wandering around. It just literally, it's so hard to put into words. I'm getting goosebumps telling you what it feels like. It's so uncomfortable. And I finally realized this is anxiety. So I messaged my son. There's been numerous times when he's on his break or something. Are you feeling really anxious today? Yeah. And I'll joke with them and say, you need to stop, because you're sending it to your mother. You know, but it's true. So, and I'm not obviously feeling the full effects of it. So that's even enough. So that's why I think I have a bit of understanding of what people are going through. And unless you are, I mean, everybody in their life has suffered anxiety, whether you want to believe it or not. You're getting ready for a new job, a new school, a move, whatever. Yes, that's normal, regular anxiety that people, you know, experience. But until you've had a panic attack, or like you say, it was very debilitating, look wonderful on the outside, but what you were going through and struggling with on your own on the inside. Let me share what Zach wrote here. Sorry about that, Zach. We're having such a good discussion. This happens sometimes.
Just get swept up in the moment. It's cool.
Yes. So he said, when something is not a big deal, I brush off the anxiety since it's manageable. It's the big goof ups that'll cost the company I work for a lot of money to fix. For example, getting a piece of medical equipment from, you have to retype that, hon. I can't read what you just said. Example, getting a PC of med equip from. Sorry, he'll probably have to rewrite it. But he said he's in Arizona. Oh, I get it now. He said there was a bracket, and then it went into the next comment. So he said, getting a piece of medical equipment from one end of Arizona where he lives to the other end of Arizona, to the end of the state, I'm guessing he's saying. I faced that obstacle many times. And he said, in those moments, I feel like lashing out at the PM, I'm guessing evening crew, but I have to restrain myself since it doesn't fix the problem.
So it sounds like he has experience of this. So what does fix the problem, and what does work for him? Because maybe it's different things in different moments, but like there's so many different ways you can cut this, but what does he need in that moment to feel in control, calm, and able to deal with it rationally? And actually in the setup, like before we've even got to that point, what boundaries need to be put in place? What is that center that he's getting back to? Yeah.
Boundaries. We don't need to say yes to everything when our plate is already full.
No.
We talked about my analogy of when you're a giving person or people rely on you and you know that and it makes you feel good to help. The problem is when we keep giving and giving and giving, if we don't take care of self first, that cup gets emptied pretty darn quick and you haven't got anything else to give to others.
Well, that's a huge part of this because the kind of analogy, the metaphor of on an airplane, when if the plane's going down or run out of oxygen, like if you're there rushing around trying to put it on everyone else before you've done yourself, I mean, you're out, you're done.
And good to anybody.
No, you're no good to anybody. So you have to put on the mask first and look after number one. And then, like you say, you can work from a full cup. You're no good to anyone working from an empty cup. So maybe Zach, there's two parts to this. One is like in that moment, what can he do to feel better and manage that anxiety and get through the problem, but also in the setup, like how is he coming into that situation? What boundaries are in place? What self-care has he done? There's a whole chapter in Generation Panic it's called Happy Healthy You, and it's really simple things. It's not rocket science. I haven't changed the world in any way, but it's like your sleep, what you're putting in your body. Do you have too much caffeine? Are you drinking too much alcohol or drugs or anything that's not good for your body? Are you doing exercise that's like releasing that energy? And ultimately, like, are you putting yourself in the best possible state to then be able to handle this? Because even something like sleep, I feel that even now, like if I've had a poor night's sleep or, whatever's happened, I've had a nightmare, I just haven't slept well, the kids have been up, I can feel it the next day. Like my body is just working a bit harder and I can confuse that in a moment, because my heart rate might be pumping a bit harder just to kind of keep me upright. I can confuse that. And actually that confusing, sorry, just on a side note, that confusing thing is a really interesting part of it as well. If we look at like renewing emotions to depleting emotions, things like excitement, which I love, like I often get quite excited by things, but actually in the same breath turned in like more of a negative way and more of a depleting way is anxiety. And so the same emotions that I feel for excitement can almost trick me and think like, my heart rate's increased, even though I'm excited. Oh, am I anxious? And even on a subconscious level, that can be interesting. But so yes,
asking yourself, what is this, right? Like,
totally.
I have to tell you, you're very intuitive because pretty well anything I've just about been about to ask you, you've said, and you're even using I use the airplane analogy. I'm getting goosebumps again. It's not cold. Or
we're meant to be talking.
We are, because it's that kind of conversation. Like even when you said minute by minute, like, and I'm smiling because I'm going, yes, yes, yes. And coming from, because I was going to ask you about the physical component, because when we know the laws of physics, that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but transferred from one place to another. And what a lot of people, I'm also a medical intuitive, so what a lot of people don't understand, and I truly believe this, and I come from a big pharma background, but I definitely embrace a lot of the more holistic, natural type of treatments out there, because I think it's just better for our bodies if we can use them. There's a time and place for Western medicine, but I really embrace Eastern culture. And what I think people don't realize, and part of my message to teach people, is how powerful our thoughts, our words, and our emotions are. And I'm going to put anxiety in there. So, for example, and I'm going to use you, Zach, sorry, but I am. When you said, when there's times when you feel like lashing out, but you've rationalized, and rightfully so, that it's not going to help the situation. But because you haven't diffused that anxiety or that energy, basically swallowed it down, when we hang on to that kind of stuff and we don't get rid of it in some constructive way, whether it's physical, meditation, using some of the tools, it can eventually develop into disease. And that's with anything, I believe, with a lower vibrational emotion. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I agree. And, you know, even the word disease is dis-ease. You know, it's that feeling of unease that's in your body. And I mean, I am by no means an expert on this, but I fully agree with you. And I think it's you know, even on a personal level. So when I was really struggling, I didn't even go to a doctor because I always thought this feels like in my mind. I didn't even kind of associate that this would be something that a doctor could help me with.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully support people who feel like they need to get the medication to help them get back on. Like you know, again, going back to that, like lack of judgment, no assumption.
Absolutely.
Whatever they need, absolutely get it. However, I am also, as you are, a firm believer in the power of our minds and the power of our thoughts. And, you know, Generation Panic, I haven't had another panic attack since 2014 using the tools of this book. And even something as simple as you were talking about the power of our thoughts is, you know, for Zach, something he might want to try is in that moment, okay, what emotion do I want or need to have? So maybe he wants to have the feeling of calm. So breathe in that feeling of calm and then breathe out that feeling of tension, whatever it might be. Or if you want to breathe in the feeling of, I don't know, being in control or excited or happy, you know, breathe that in and then take it out. And also even going back to that modeling, like think of a time when you have felt calm and, you know, from any stage of your life. It doesn't need to be from like a specific work context, but I guarantee that he's had, if he's a team player, he's going to have had other situations, perhaps in his personal life, where he's been expected to come in and fix something, which might be tiny. He might, you know, be called in to fix the like burnt lasagna, but he's dealt with that calmly. And then how can he bring that resource to this one so that he knows that he's not under threat? It's like, it's just playing with your mind, basically. It's like changing your state.
Even like I said, with mentoring people how to access their intuitive gifts, that's where I was going with the babies. And I apologize, my mind's going a mile a minute here because there's so much I want to ask and talk to you about. Like I said, we all have these gifts, like whether you want to call it like I trust my gut, like people say that, like I just know that I need to follow my gut on this, or my, you know, whatever you want to use, what the words are. We all have that. We all have that intuition, right? And it's the same thing where I go with this when I'm trying to teach people to remember it, because that's where I was going with babies and so on, because I've seen many babies. Your mom, you said you got kids. Have you ever seen your kids as little ones, like say 7, 8 month old, maybe they're just sitting up or whatever, and they're sitting in the room and they're looking around and their eyes are following something and they're laughing and they're giggling. Doesn't mean you have a ghost. It could be a relative popping in to say hello to the baby or whatever it is. But we all have that. And again, when I mentioned, you know, especially over here in North America, I trust my gut, or I know it. I don't know why I know this, but I know this is what I'm supposed to do. Well, like I say, it's the same thing with anything in life, right? And so where you go with that when you're teaching people this is, and they think it's crazy, but it's true. If you picture it and you imagine it, it happens, even with healing. So, and my youngest son, I never talk about my kids this much, but it's funny because, for example, last night he said to me, "Mommy, my elbow hurts. I think I pulled the muscle." And I said, "Okay, honey." I said, "Maybe you want me to put some pain cream on it for you." And he said, "Okay." And he goes, "Well, feel it, Mommy. You can feel it. Feel it." And what he means by that is, one of the things I do is, if I close my eyes and run my hand over your aura, for me, now everybody's different. Some people feel a dead spot, some people feel cold. Everybody can do this. But, and I run my hand over with my eyes closed, and I will be able to pinpoint where it is. That's what he's talking about, feeling it. But where I'm going with this is, when we picture it or we're open to it, and it becomes, so with healing, I like to use different colors. I've got quite a few videos on my YouTube channel teaching people about feeling energy, imagining, and I don't tell people red is for this, purple's for this, black is for that. I walk you through it and I ask you the questions. What does it feel like for you? And then you use your color coding system any way you want. But for me, I like to use emerald green sometimes for certain things. And you've just had a crazy day and you can't see the color. I have literally pulled up my phone, Googled a swatch of emerald green. I will focus on the emerald green, put my hand out, and just be pulling that picture into my mind and picturing transmitting it through is what I'm saying. And I'm not more special than anybody else. We can all do this. After this big long explanation, that's where I'm going with this. We can all do this and so much more.
Oh, so powerful, and so many things like out of that. I completely agree. We get what we focus our mind on. So if it's the emerald green, then that absolutely can come in.
Right.
A couple of things. I think even kind of bringing out or personifying or physicalizing all of these things can be really powerful. So even like one of the chapters is on saboteurs, like those gremlins, those voices in our head, and even being able to our worst or our best friends. I would encourage you, like, actually a lot of people, I just got a message from a client the other day who's like, Gollum's turning into my best friend. I'm just loving hanging out with Gollum.
My precious.
Yeah, my precious, exactly. But things feel more scary when they're in our heads, and we don't have anything kind of physical to hang it on. So even being able to kind of personify those voices, or the reason that I thought of that was you were talking about trusting your gut, and trusting your gut is a chapter in the book.
No,
and one of the it's absolutely in there, and chapter 2.5, and one of the techniques in that chapter of trusting your gut is like locating where your gut is, and what does it even look like, and what does it feel like, because we're often, we're such a heady world and heady beings that like run around just in this little bit.
Yeah.
And we forget to connect to our gut. But actually our intuition, I would argue, is one of our most powerful tools. And like when I actually take the time to connect with my gut, listen to my intuition, like it absolutely knows the way forward. It's just whether I have identified it correctly, where it is or what it is, how I can access it, and then actually listen and or act on it if I choose to. Yes, gut feeling is like just so important.
We were meant to have this conversation this
evening,
obviously.
Totally.
So true. And what came to me when you were talking about that, though, and there's a woman that I really love her work. I use her work quite a bit. Her name is Agi Heale, and it's called Understanding, you know who she is, Understanding the Language of Your Body. I use a lot of her techniques. I've tweaked them a little bit with what I do, but she is so right. And you are so right about that. We are so cerebral thinking, and I don't like the term monkey mind, but you'll hear it in the light worker field, is that we think that our brain runs the show, not realizing that our subconscious never shuts off, speaks a different language than our brain. And it is actually, like you said, we do know, but it's training ourselves to take the time, and no, it doesn't take hours, just a few minutes every day, is connecting with your body again. So some of the things we've talked about, breathing, taking good care of yourself, so making sure that you get rest. I tell people that's the most important time to heal. Like,
and process.
Process, absolutely. But say, for example, you've got something going on and you're not feeling well or whatever it is. Imagine a bubble, whatever color you want, of light. And people say, well, can I do this or can I do that? There's no rules. You're the maker of the rules. You design it, you create it, whatever you want it to do. You ask it to do such and such a thing while you're sleeping. it will happen. Even if you don't believe it, that's where I was going with fake it till you make it. Because when you put it out there with the power of your words, and the more that we put it out there, it's all energy and it starts to build. And no, I always say I'm pretty down to earth as a light worker, if you will. But you can even go back to science with this. Like I love this. Dr. Emoto, I think it is, Japanese scientist with the water experiments. Have you ever?
No, I
Oh,
don't.
you got to hear this. So it's actually pretty landmark. He took a glass of water, put it on one end. I think it was at a school or something like that, and another glass of water at another end. And I think he's also done it with plants. But with the water, the one, he had a sign, please tell me only good, positive things like I love you. I bet you'll taste amazing. Like just really wonderful things. On the other side, he wanted, excuse me, the students every time they pass to tell it, you're awful. I hate you. Really low vibrational things. And then he looked at the water under a microscope. The results are astounding. Now, I'm going to take it a little further. We are made up to at least 80% of water. So can you imagine, never mind the water that we're drinking, what's going on collectively in the world right now with the emotions? Okay, so we're taking that in physically. Never mind if words can have that much power over a glass of water. Imagine, because we're basically like a glass of water walking around. Can you imagine? Mind blowing.
That is mind blowing. I'm definitely going to go and check that out.
I'll send it to you. I'll send you the research.
Yeah.
Remind me. I'll send it to you on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so, it also speaks to, I'm going to completely butcher this quote, but have you had a Roald Dahl, who's a children's author? Yeah. So he has this quote, which kind of sums this up in some way. Well, I like to think of it is that if people have negative thoughts, they're going to be like really ugly and they're going to be the grossest human beings. Whereas the people who have positive thoughts and good vibrations, even if they're really ugly, they look like sunshine. They have like rays of sun coming out of their face and they always look lovely.
It's true.
And I believe that like the messages that we tell ourselves are so powerful. Mm-hmm. And unless we start changing that dialogue, there's 2 chapters actually. One is about even understanding your saboteurs, but another one of really creating that dialogue with them, because they're ultimately there to keep us safe. They want to protect us. There's always going to be like one of my favorite questions to ask even myself is, what's the 2% of goodness in this? Like even in the most horrendous, like no hope, dark, challenging situations, there's always going to be some goodness. Mm-hmm. And by changing those dialogues, those messages that you're taking in internally, like your life can transform. And if you're not scared of those voices or they're not too dominating, like I always think of like driving a car. Yes. And these like little gremlins, they take the driving seat, the driving wheel, and they then like pump up their music and decide the direction, the speed, they like fly along. And actually you need to move those like pesky saboteurs and get them into the boot or drop them on the side of the road and put your best self in the driving seat so that you decide the direction, you decide the tone, you decide the music, whatever. And yes, that in turn, I think just makes people feel happier. Like
empowered.
Empowered, exactly.
So many people I have found, I've always had difficulty understanding, not in judgment, but why people think they need to have a leader. And some people do. They're just wired that way. They feel better that way. They're not used to making their own decisions or what have you. But when they try to take, and I'm going to be bold here and say your life back, when it's anxiety or something that can be very debilitating and put you in the driver's seat, that alone can be scary. Have you found people get anxiety over the fact of getting rid of their anxiety because they've never ever been a decision maker or someone to empower themselves or take back that control? That can be a lot really scary for people that are used to being a follower. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes. And again, it goes back to baby steps. And, you know, with all the tools in the book, it's trying them, taking them at your pace, not what you think you should, like the speed you should be going at. But another chapter in the book is connecting with your best self, and that kind of inner leader, that part of you that knows the right way and has compassion and has like full faith that you're going to find your way and you're going to know what you're going to do.
And you're not going to figure it out one day. That's the other thing too, right? Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like you said, it's so important with baby steps, because people think that no matter it's weight loss, no matter what it is, people expect perfection and it's got to be done in one day. It didn't take one day to get there. And I know we'd love it all to wave a magic wand and it be gone. But even, do you get people to journal as well or anything to see where they've come? Oh, good. Let's hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So journaling, again, there's been like tons of research around the power of journaling and how it can be, I think, really in any form. Like there's so many different ways that you can do it that work well for different people. One that I'm loving doing at the moment with some clients is free writing, and just not having any rules, not having any expectations, no grammar, no right spelling, whatever it is. And just, I don't know, setting a timer and having 5 minutes of just out. Because again, on that point, we have so much swirling through our head. You know, there's so much information that's coming in and out at any given moment. And I always think of it like a running track, and like our thoughts are running round and round and round and round. And actually we need to take a moment to be like, stop, and I need to get that out or see what it even is, because it can be very dangerous when that becomes normal or like something that we're used to, that it just kind of spirals, or it doesn't really serve us. And yes, so journaling I think is an incredibly powerful tool to use. I find so much can come
powerful. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Finish it. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
I was just gonna say so much can come into it. So I actually have kind of used, I love Tim Ferriss. Have you come across Tim Ferriss? I kind of he has a great structure which just says like, I am, like how I'm feeling. So it's a great way to kind of stock check and see how you are internally and what you want to achieve for the day and what you're grateful for. And it's not just big picture gratitude, as in like, I'm grateful for the, you know, I don't know, like the love of my family or whatever. But even something small, like I'm really grateful for this like tiny little drop of rain that I can see on the window right now. Or, you know, it should be large and small. And then there's also a check-in at the end of the day. And I like that because it's so fast. Like I'm quite impatient, as you might have picked up on. And so it's a great way just to like check in and get kind of, I don't know, it fills me with good energy, and it's a great way to see where I'm at, and encourages me to slow down and really, you know, our body has so many messages, and that's where I was going so wrong before, is that I wasn't listening. Like I wasn't, even if you quite simply ask your body, like, what do you want to tell me? And it will give you an answer. It will tell you like what's going on. You just
Ina Segal probably too, because it teaches you how to listen to your body. And if you can slow down, have some quiet, because we're not comfortable with silence. A lot of people, even in a conversation, if don't get me wrong, if you've been together for years and maybe happily married, you know, older couple or something, then yes, it's comfortable silence. But how many of us, and there's been times in my life too, where you sit there with someone you don't know well, and somebody feels like they have to fill the conversation space instead of just sitting in that quiet. And your body will talk to you. I say pain is a message. It's your body's voice, for example. But you ask your body what it needs, your body will tell you, right?
Yes. There's another chapter on the power of silence, and
no
historically this book, you're just like selling the book for me. It's perfect. You're just kind of running through all the different chapters.
We were meant to talk tonight.
Yeah, exactly. It was meant to be. But I believe that like things are meant to come when they're coming. I don't know. We're meant to be here.
I do too.
But the power of silence, and that's something that I've often really struggled with. Like, I like to feel, I kind of, I have a belief that I find that like energizing and exciting. And yet there is so much power in the silence and slowing down and connecting that needs to happen. Yeah. But in Segal's book, it's just so, I found it mind blowing. I can't remember the title of the one that I've got, but it discusses all the different parts of your body. And then if you're feeling,
it's called The Secret Language of Your Body. And
that's it.
Goes through every body part. But what it does is, and I use this in my practice with healing, when I have somebody having something going on, is I will photocopy the pages, send it to them, encourage them to purchase the book, because there's nothing like having the hard copy. I have this wonderful app called Scribed, and it's really reasonable, $8.99 a month. I can look at a whole whack of any kind of books, but the ones I'm going to use in my practice, I buy. But the reason why I send it to people is it gives you questions to ask yourself and your body. And I tell people, I don't need to know the answers. Those answers are for you. And then it's like a recipe book or cookbook, because it goes through, well, then if this is a yes, then you go here. If it's this, it's this. If it's that, it's that. Easy read, easy to use. And I say to people, even if you don't believe in this kind of stuff, how can it hurt? You're not going for surgery. You're not taking a bunch of medications. You're off from work. You're ill. You're not feeling well. What have you got to lose? Right?
And what I've really liked about it is that when I've struggled to connect with my body in some way, it's provided me with a starting point that has begun the conversation. So if I have hurt my little finger, I'll go and read up about it. And it's like, okay, well, this could be linked to, I mean, I can't even think, like being stubborn or not letting something go. Yes. And then that for me is like, it creates the conversation, and it in itself, I find gives me the permission to explore that, or like go down that path. And so much of this and so much of Generation Panic is like empowering and giving people the permission to explore this and start that conversation.
And we've never needed permission, but the thing is, we get so many assaults to our whole psyche, if you will, in this day and age. And never mind, and again, now I sound like this hippy dippy light worker, and I'm not usually this way, but the thing is, even the EMF coming off of our phones, I mean, the TVs, the computer screens, I mean, we're running at, we need like 48 hours in a 24-hour day, because people are busy. Both people need to work. If you have a 2-adult home and you've got children, for example, I mean, you're constantly running or going. And even, look at what the state of mental health has been during what's been going on with COVID. And because people, first of all, so many people, we've often, all of us have said, geez, if I only had time off, I'd do this and this and this. But there's been so much fear, anxiety, depression, you name it, collectively, that people really don't know what to do with themselves when they have that free time, right? Especially with anxiety built in. You can't even think about where you're going to go with this or what you're going to do. Would you agree?
Yes, I think it's something that comes up again and again with my clients, with my coaching clients, is that I think people are just exhausted. It's been like a crazy 18 months that we were essentially not prepared for. And historically, I think the way that most people work is in sprints. We have maybe really challenging periods at work or in your personal life, but there's always like an end sight, there's an end goal, there's a finish line. And so we're quite, whether that's like a holiday or the project gets completed, or I don't know, something comes to some sort of resolution. And for the first time, I think out of our control, we have found ourselves in an endurance race, and we are not prepared for an endurance race. And so people are quite frankly exhausted. And I think even just the reality of the situation is that it's very hard to create those boundaries. And I find this as well, like I really struggled with this over the past year, that my office is closed at the moment in Singapore. Like I'm not unable to go to it, so I'm working from home. But I'm here now, and my dinner table's 5 meters that way, and my bed is 3 meters beyond that. There's little separation. There's little distinction between these different areas.
Yeah.
And in particular, I've had holiday in inverted commas when I've had like a week off, but ultimately with us being in exactly the same location, I find it really, really challenging to truly switch off. And that might also be that I have my own business, but when there's no change to your environment, or there's no, even like on a subconscious level, like indicators of a shift in state or a shift in location.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this with clients, like talking about working from home, is that historically people have so many subconscious or conscious like flags that tell them that they, like they're commuting to work, they're putting on their work clothes, they're putting on makeup, they're combing their hair. And then they've also got the kind of, so that's going up into work, and then they've got the kind of decompress as well. Yeah. Whereas when that lead up and lead down is 30 seconds from bathroom to desk, there's no like wind up, wind down. There's no ability to really effectively change it. Sorry, I've gone on a bit there, but yeah, it's something that's coming up again and again.
I think you've said it perfectly. And I think it's a really important point. Never mind what you've just said. You're absolutely right. But what I find I'm seeing too, which also can really greatly add to anxiety, people are spending a lot more time with their significant other or spouses. So we are seeing, and many people have been on many different podcasts as a guest talking about this too. What we've seen a rash of, besides most sadly, a lot of suicide, but also breakdowns of marriages, like marriages for 50, 30, 40, 50 years that you thought people would never break up, but they're not used to spending all this time together. And I jokingly call them children of the corn, like the corn instead of the corn, but pregnancies, because there's only so much you can do. But the problem is too, like you said, there's no switch off. Like, you know what I mean?
No.
And I think that's what you're saying here is, you always hear the old adage of we leave work at work and home at home. So we don't bring our problems from home to work and vice versa. Well, how do you delineate that? Never mind that everybody's had to be so flexible and make so many changes. Like probably your children aren't used to having you home all the time. And then there's motherhood that, or parenthood, whether you're mother or father, but I'm, speaking specifically to you, that there's motherhood involved, or there's other duties that you do, but now that mom's home. Actually, I just watched the most funniest video today. There's this lady out there, and how it started, it came up in my YouTube feed. And these 4 women are singing to Queen's song, Bohemian Rhapsody, about menopause. I was just killing myself laughing. It was hilarious. But I actually posted it, but with a positive way of whether choosing to live in victimhood or embracing it all because it's made you who you are today. But she had another video that I couldn't stop laughing. And it was dogs. She actually took dogs with the software that makes them look like talking about how unbelievably grateful pets are that their parents are home all the time. And it's funny. I'm not doing it justice, but you think about it, like people have had such a shift. No wonder we're seeing what we're seeing. Would you agree, disagree, anything to add to that?
Yes, agree. And I think the effects haven't even been fully realized. This is going to be something that is going to come out in the wash for months, years to come. And I think a lot of people, it's interesting. Without being too black and white about it, I think it's either been a really positive things for relationships and couples to be together, or it's been a complete divider. And like you say, it's been the breakdown of those relationships. It's just been an incredibly intense and unprecedented year. I mean, we couldn't have prepared for it. Everyone's been under stress, and probably had anxiety in some context. And And that's really challenging. You know, that's not what we're kind of built for. We're meant for connection and deeper relationships and hugs and touch, and not just sat in one place locked inside. So I'm kind of scared to see what's going to happen, but I feel confident that Generation Panic as a book and a resource kit can help people manage those challenging moments and manage those relationships, and then reassess, realign. We go back to why you fell in love.
We only got about 15 minutes left. See how fast this goes? It goes by so fast. But what I wanted to ask you, first of all, one more question. Then I'm really curious, because this isn't all you do in your practice. So I'd love for people to hear more about the work that you do. But it's such an interesting topic. I love that I always use people's books as a background. I didn't get a chance to ask you, but I figured you wouldn't mind, because even in the subconscious, people will see that, right? They'll pick it up. But how did you come up with a name? That's a really interesting name.
Generation Panic. So here's the book. It's a real book. How incredible. So the title, it just really spoke to me. I just thought this really is a generation who are panicking, and they don't have the tools, they don't have the awareness to feel better, feel happier. Like, life does not need to feel that hard. Mm-hmm. And when I was struggling, I absolutely was part of that Generation Panic, and was so adamant on people not seeing that, mm-hmm. that I would have done anything to have had this toolkit to do on my own time. And so, yes, Generation Panic it just speaks to the people who I see as being a part of that, like with all that change that I was talking about earlier.
No, I love it. So now, would you mind explaining a little bit, because you said you're a life coach, you're an NLP, you do all kinds of things. Would you share that with people? Because I'm guessing with your business being online and you're not in a brick and mortar, then, do you have a full roster? Do you take clients from online? Or just because I'm sure there's people that are curious out there and can see them very deeply connecting with your personality. Personality.
Thanks, Lorilei. Yes, so interesting. So I originally started my coaching practice in London. Okay. And so when I moved to Singapore, I still have my business in London up and running. And so have historically worked with clients all around the world. And it's never phased. For me, I'm very lucky. It hasn't been like a mega shift to online, because a lot of my clients were already online. And I often advise clients anyway to have a mix of face-to-face or on Zoom, but also audio calls, because there's so much power that comes when you shut off one of your core senses. And I think if people feel like they can, I don't know, kick back on the sofa and whatever they feel comfortable wearing, and like have whatever emotions they want on their face without feeling self-conscious, that can often lead to a very powerful and deep conversation with more silence, the richness of silence. So now I'm up and running in Singapore and run coaching programs for clients, and whether that's through corporates or individuals, and within that, it's kind of one-on-one coaching or running assessments and then doing assessment debriefs off the back of it. Mm-hmm. And I also do facilitations, like workshops for people all over the world. Just did one in Germany, England, Singapore. So yeah, it really is like a global business now, which is cool. Get people all over.
I heard that, because I remembered you were in Singapore when I was leaving you a message this morning about. I always confirm with my guests the day before, usually they're early in the morning, and then I seen London, and I said, you're in London, and something you said, I said, I thought you were in Singapore. You didn't even say that. I just remembered. But my point is, so what would your client look like? Like, say somebody felt like a coach, and there's many people using the word coach that I don't know if I would use the word coach with it. And again, no judgment. It depends on what you're looking for. So if somebody was needing help, what would they come to you for? Why would they use your services?
There's a couple of main ways. One is if someone's feeling very anxious and overwhelmed, and they just, related to the book, it's kind of the person who was where I was, of being really ambitious, on the surface succeeding, doing a lot of things right, rising up through the ranks, but kind of behind doors or behind the scenes struggling in some way.
Okay.
And so anxiety is a huge part of that. But also I work with a lot of rising talent, like, again, those kind of like ambitious people who are kind of rising up through companies. Perhaps they've taken on new responsibilities or new bits of leadership, and then essentially tool them up to make sure that they're leading at their best and on the front foot. So those are probably the two main types of clients. And to be honest, they're usually in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. Just like awesome people who are pretty well put together, and then they're just getting through life like we all are.
No, because I knew that anxiety was part of it. And that's why I was asking. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I thought, people are looking, because like I said, a lot of people use the word coach. And I've actually had this conversation with many peers about when they're trying to put their online business out there and thinking about the word coach. And they'll ask me what I think, and I'll just say, well, with no judgment, what are you going to be doing? What are you going to be offering? Do you have the qualifications to say that you're a coach? Because most people know what a life coach is, or whatever kind of online coach that they're going to be accessing. But most people, and again, we get into the problem of assuming that people have trained or have certifications. And I don't even think that you have to have a certification to coach in certain arenas. But I think with what you're doing, when you're working with corporate and what have you, there has to be something behind just the label. What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. It's one of my biggest frustrations in the industry, is that there's no
accountability.
Yes, there's no accountability. There's no kind of barriers to entry or any real kind of clarification of is someone actually genuinely qualified to do this? Because anyone tomorrow, like, I mean, my I don't know, Joe Blogs down the corridor could tomorrow set up a website and say they're a coach, and they would get clients, and that's not a problem. Like, but for me, it is a problem. But the sad part of that is that coaching is so one-on-one, and so if you have someone who has taken that really courageous first step of wanting to engage a coach, and it's a negative experience, that's kind of determining how they feel about coaches in general. And I am completely biased, but coaching, it's a no-brainer that I think everyone should have it, and it can be utterly transformational if you are in the right hands, working with someone who you're meant to be working with. And so it makes me sad that those people would have such a poor experience and potentially change their relationship, like their perception of coaching. So, but I think I just hope that those people come in the wash. Like, if I think of my business now, 90% of it is run on referrals. And so it's all done off, and that's because I've had rigorous training. I've trained with the Coaches Training Institute, the Heart Math Institute, City University. I've got the NLP. I've just gone through the master practitioner of the NLP. And so being really tooled up to work with a client, whatever they need help on, is ultimately going to serve the client. Like, that's what we're here to do, is to like make.
You're well. Yeah. And I feel like we're on the same page. We're being very tactful here, and rightfully so. But that's exactly, you couldn't have put it more succinctly in a nutshell with how I've been feeling. Again, it's not with judgment, but it's with somebody asking me, well, I think I should put coach behind my name, because I'm seeing this a lot. Again, we get back into the labels. I'm not crazy about the word light worker, but it's the buzzword of what I'm doing out there right now. And so when someone has asked me very tactfully, I've tried to say exactly what you just said, that are you really going to be coaching, and do you realize what a certified coach actually goes through? And if people have done their homework expecting that, and you haven't engaged in the rigorous training and experiences, I try to, again, tactfully say, do you really feel like you're equipped to be calling yourself a coach? And again, it's not to fight, it's not to cause drama. It's when someone's asked my opinion, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing with being a registered nurse. We have in Canada here now registered practical nurses. They used to be called RNAs, or registered nursing assistants. Never mind about a conflict of interest that we're under the same professional college, but they are now transferring a lot of our roles with extra training to RPNs. But then you're running into people now. I've had even personal care support workers, and we need them. There's nothing wrong with that, but telling people they're a nurse. So you will get the general public who are starting to get savvy saying, well, what kind of nurse are you? Because they're realizing, again, people are just, and it's not just my field. Like, we have to, I think, be so careful when
Yes.
that's a whole different show practically. But
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this for hours. But you're right, and I think a part of it as well is educating the person who's looking for coaching, because even me now, I always have a half an hour free, non-obligatory chemistry call that's just like, are we even the right fit for each other? And if we're not, who can I refer you to? Because that is so important. You've got to work with people that you'd like back and are behind.
that's integrity.
And
That's integrity. Really, it is. Never mind
yeah.
understanding a relationship, but if I can't help you, who can I refer you to? Definitely.
Oh, absolutely. Like, big picture, this is not about me earning my fee. This is about like you feeling good. Like, I don't know, it's not about me getting one extra client. But even in those conversations, I'm always like, ask me about my qualifications. Like, I've got so many, and no one does. No one cares. Like, they don't have that context. So therefore, there's not a baseline for them to say, hey, you're I don't know, you've trained with this person or that. There's so many coach training. There's so many coaches. I don't know. Oh,
No,
maybe this is like another calling.
we're on the same page with this, because I feel I hear little munchkins in the background. So cute.
The joys of living in a small Singapore flat. Sorry.
Don't apologize. That my dog was desperately trying, this giant German Shepherd, to push my camera over because my son let her in while we were talking. But I find our viewers love, like, when people, you hear noises like that, and I don't mean noises, they're delightful, or people like people's pets come on. You know why? It makes us real people. And
Totally.
I think that's so important in this day and age. I love that you shared this. We didn't have almost enough time. I'm hoping you'll come back on, Agi. Big Agi.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh no, I just loved it, and I was so excited. And then, like I said, I can't believe how intuitive you actually are, because our businesses kind of cross in the way of certain things that we're sharing and teaching, even almost word for word. So I really do believe this was meant to happen. Now, where can people get a hold of you? Where can they buy the book? All kinds of things like that.
So you can buy the book anywhere. It's or everywhere, I should say. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Depository. I've recorded an audiobook, so if you want to listen to my voice as you, I don't know, walk around the park. And yes, absolutely. Please do connect with me. I'm Agi Heale, AGIHEALE. I'm on the usual places. Find me on LinkedIn, Instagram.
I found you.
You found me, exactly. I'm not that hard to find.
Well,
quite a unique name.
I want to tell you what Zach said. First of all, he said you can use me as an example anytime, Lorilei. Thank you, Zach. But this is actually, I know he usually writes something positive, but he wrote something very nice here. He said, loved the show tonight. Thank you, Agi, for sharing your insight into the issues I deal with, and I appreciate your feedback. Much love to you, ladies. Have a good night, and I will talk to you, he said, later. So he really
Zach, I'm so thrilled to hear it. And that's what it's all about. Like, I don't know, that's good for me. I'm going to start my day on the right foot.
Well, I'm glad. Well, what happens is we get lots of people live watching. Sometimes we have an active chat. YouTube's our newest venue. We lost our big channel. Long story, not through our fault, just YouTube politics. So this is a newer channel. So we don't always get a lot of people over here, but we have our regulars, or people will watch on the replay, and I know they're going to love you. I want to remind people that I will be back, I think this Friday, if I'm not mistaken. I think I forgot to ask Joe, but we should be having our, excuse me, our host chat with the Centralist. If it's not this week, because I know Joe's been having people on from Writers of the Future, a show on our network that some of our shows are up for an award with them, with the People's Choice. And I know he's been talking, but he'll probably play the commercial at the end. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I will be back next Monday night. I have an interesting guest for you guys. It's Dr. Rima Labo. And if you haven't heard her name, you need to look her up because she's been talking about what's been happening since 2009. She's a fellow tribunal judge with myself, that we're working on a lot of these things behind the scenes. And it's going to be an interesting, explosive show. So I send you all so much love and light, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Agi.